Coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered for Thursday, April 11th, 2019. I'm Monique Presley, in for Roland Martin. He's on the Tom Joyner Morning Show cruise, and Roland will be back on Monday. A young white male suspect is in custody in connection with the arson fires of 3 black churches in one parish in Louisiana. Thousands turned out for a celebration of the life of Los Angeles activist, entrepreneur, and rapper Nipsey Hussle. We've got highlights of the funeral at the Staples Center. Autism disproportionately affects black children, yet black children are less likely to be identified on the autism spectrum. It's World Autism Awareness Month, and I'll talk with an education law expert, Denise Pierce, about how parents can navigate the education system. Bishop T.D. Jakes has a brand new book. He and I preview the book that comes out next Tuesday, and also talk about his very successful programs for citizens returning from prison. We'll discuss the prevalence of mental health issues and the stigma associated with it in the African American community today with therapist, minister, and founder of Turn the Light On, Dr. Anita Phillips. And why all the talk now about reparations? It's about the power of the black vote. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
I'm Monique Presley, in for Roland Martin. He's on the Tom Joyner Morning Show cruise, living it up, but he'll be back on Monday. There has been an arrest in the investigation of the arson committed at 3 black churches in the span of 10 days in one parish in Louisiana. The man was identified as Holden Matthews, a white male aged 21. He is the son of a sheriff's deputy in St. Landry's Parish. Authorities have not labeled these fires as hate crimes. However, Matthews was active in Facebook groups that focused on black metal and heathenism and Nordic religious beliefs, according to posts seen by CNN. There is also a possible connection between black metal music and church burnings in other parts of the world. The churches are St. Mary's Baptist Church in Port Barre, Greater Union Baptist Church in Opelousas, and Mount Pleasant Baptist Church in the same town. There was a news conference this morning. The governor of Louisiana, John Bel Edwards, spoke first.
As you all know, over the past couple of weeks, I and the people across the state of Louisiana, in fact, people across the country, have been deeply troubled by the disturbing string of church fires here in St. Landry Parish and also one in Caddo Parish. And it has been especially painful because it reminds us of a very dark past of intimidation and fear.
I stand before you to tell you that this community is safe again. We are extremely, unequivocally confident that we have the person who is responsible for these tragic crimes on these 3 churches. And I have to tell you, this investigation is probably one of the most unique arson investigations that I've been involved in my 33 years, in that this was an attack on the house of God. This was an attack on not just a place that people go on a weekly interval and worship. It's a place where they've had weddings. It's a place where they've had funerals. It's a place where generations, we're talking about buildings that were over 100 years old, where generations of families have been raised. So though the spirit is still strong, the landmark has been destroyed. We took that very seriously. Immediately when this investigation ensued, we knew that our pastors were important to us. Immediately after these fires, the pastors were brought in, and they were part of our investigative team. The first thing they did was pray for us, and that's what set us on the right track. The second thing they did was they became the agents of information. They were a calming voice in the community. And finally, there were reasons why we were able to cultivate the scientific leads that we did.
Because I don't know if you're familiar with the scripture that says all things work together for the good of them that love the Lord and are called according to his purpose.
That's right.
We all had a purpose. All of you had a purpose to be here today and a purpose in this investigation. Another part of the scripture, Paul says we must learn to endure suffering for the sakes of the people. And we've suffered. But I think it has a cause, a higher cause. Even though we've lost our church, our building, look who he's brought together. Thank everyone. Now I can go to sleep. Because I'd rather even though I pastor 2 churches, I have a full-time job driving an 18-wheeler. And I want to thank those that made contributions to us that to help us in rebuilding and those that we've had connections from far all over the country to help us rebuild and within our cities. And that's why I say things are bright, because I've heard from pastors and ministers in the area that I've never talked to in my life.
Joining me on the panel today is Eugene Craig, CEO of the Eugene Craig Organization, and Erica Savage-Wilson, host of the Savage Politics podcast. Welcome to Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Appreciate it.
Heady topic to start with, right? I just want to throw this out there. Here's my concern. I'm glad that they found this Holden Matthews. But the victory lap, to me, is a bit premature because he wasn't raised up in a vacuum. There are more where he came from, and that, to me, ought to concern them. So when the sheriff was saying, we're safe again, I'm like, oh, really, Eugene?
I mean, this is another act of terrorism, and it should be treated as such. You know, what he did doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's been happening for literally hundreds of years. Black churches being burnt down by white people, by white nationalists, by white terrorists. And, you know, I don't think it's fair necessarily to try to find some kind of reason or some other motive or whatnot other than, hey, this is terrorism and it should be treated as such.
Right, and hate crimes we're seeing are on the rise. That was the other thing I was a little interested in. We've never seen anything like this in our...
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I find that very hard to believe, particularly because we're talking about Louisiana, we're talking about the Deep South, and so that was a way that black folks were terrorized is through church fires, and then people brazenly coming into their places of worship, either arming guns or intimidating them not to vote. And immediately, this whole incident took me back to the Dylan Roof episode, where we had a quick turnover of law enforcement talking about how the church community quickly embraced them and it's time to forgive. So I definitely agree that we definitely need to allow everything to come out to play. And then the crime, I think he might get up to 45 years, hoping that he does. In fact, he is convicted and he does serve time that does fit with the crime that he's committed.
But Eugene, what concerns me, and I agree with Erica on this, I'm glad that he's going to get however much time he's going to get if he's proven guilty of doing this, because right now he's just alleged and arrested. But what concerns me is we have people on one side that are saying young white male, black churches, it's a hate crime. And then we have people on the other side saying no connection whatsoever, not a hate crime, not terrorism. We have to strike some balance in the middle and figure out a way to enforce those laws.
It's absolutely terrorism. I mean, he targeted those churches. It's absolutely hate crime. He targeted those churches. There are white churches in that area that went unscathed. And so the thing is this, we either as a country have to take a firm stance against terrorism, white nationalism, or just let it fester and deal with what comes with, which is nothing good.
Right, and it takes our community, doesn't it, Erica? Because to me, I mean, we're not going to get anything without a demand. I'm going to be Frederick Douglass in a minute.
Right, right. We've always shown leadership in those areas. And so I definitely agree that this was an act of domestic terrorism and should be treated as such. But I think just what you just said, that it's really going to take our community pushing forward and really leading the way to say that this, again, is an act of domestic terrorism. It should be treated as such, not something that's, you know, simply swept up under the rug and we're all safe again, let's all hold hands. No, there needs to be a measure of justice that's felt and witnessed by the community there and the community writ large.
That's right. It's not time for us to take it easy, that's for sure, when there's fires everywhere, literally.
Seriously.
In Los Angeles and the music world turned out today to honor Nipsey Hussle, who was killed, gunned down on March 31st. The alleged shooter, Eric Holder, has officially been charged with the murder. He has pleaded not guilty, and the bond is $5 million. He is being held in solitary confinement, reportedly out of fear for his life. The funeral, billed as a celebration of life, was held at the Staples Center. More than 20,000 tickets for the event, which was free, were claimed within minutes of being made available online earlier this week. Today's processional began and went past the parking lot of the shopping center where Hussle was gunned down in front of his own clothing store. The same parking lot where he started his music career selling CDs. The funeral procession wound through the Crenshaw neighborhood onto the Staples Center, where the famous and the just regular folks came to pay tribute. The funeral started late, I hear an hour late, as thousands crowded into the venue that was once used for the Michael Jackson Memorial in 2009. There were performances and tributes from Nipsey Hussle's mom and longtime girlfriend, Lauren London. But let's begin with Karen Civil reading this letter from President Barack Obama.
While most folks look at the Crenshaw neighborhood where he grew up and only see gangs, bullets, and despair, Nipsey saw potential. He saw hope. He saw a community that even through its flaws taught him to always keep going. His choice to invest in that community, rather than to ignore it, to build a skills training center, a co-working space in Crenshaw, to lift up the Eritrean American community. He set an example for young people to follow and is a legacy worth of celebration. I hope his memory inspires more good work in Crenshaw and communities like it.
If I were to die today, there's not a thing that I would change. Maybe I have made mistakes, been through my fair share of pain, but all in all, it's been okay. I've lived well. The more that I see, the more that I know. I don't know anything at all. The more that I breathe, I start to go slow. Of all the many things I can only recall, all of the good things, all of the good things, only the good, only the good, only the good things, all of the good things, only the good, only the good.
Somehow I know that there's a place up above with no more hurt and struggling, free of all atrocities and suffering, because I feel the unconditional love from one who cares enough for me. So erase all my burdens and let me be free to fly like a bird, take to the sky. I need you now, Lord, to carry me high. by my side. Sometimes this life can be so cold. I pray you come and carry me home. Can we recover? Will this world ever be filled with peace and harmony? Or with no brutality? If we loved each other, will we find victory? But in this us reality, sometimes I'm so despondent that I feel the need to fly like a bird, take to the sky and meet you now, Lord. Carry me high, don't let the world break me tonight. I need the strength of you by my side. Sometimes this life can be so cold. I pray you come and carry me home.
I feel like when I was a little girl and you would read the story tales that there's a king and there's a castle and there's royalty and they're having a celebration and they invite people from lands far apart and wide to come into their kingdom and to celebrate with them. And I just thank you. I'm honored. And I know that if Ermias can look down on us, that he's very honored also. He was very humble. And I'm just glad that the legacy of love that my mother started and that she passed on to me, that I passed on to my son, and since he was in the public arena, that he passed some of the love in his heart into the love that's in your hearts. So let's water the seeds of love that Ermias displayed to you, that you know that you have planted in your heart. Let's water that love and let it grow.
We lost an incredible soul. We lost someone very rare to us, and we lost a real one. And we won't ever be the same. But in Hussle's words, because he used to always say this, the game is going to test you, never fold. Stay 10 toes down. It's not on you, it's in you. And what's in you, they can't take away. And he's in all of us. And to Ermias, the love of my life, you know what it is. Grief is the final act of love. My heart hears you. I feel you everywhere. I'm so grateful that I had you. I love you beyond this earth. And until we meet again, the marathon continues.
So we had just beautiful tribute from longtime girlfriend Lauren London. I love the way it ended with the marathon continues. We've been seeing a whole lot of memes about that going throughout social media, all over IG. But what is it about this particular death, Erica, that you think has kind of caused not just our country, but the world to stop and pay attention?
I think he's the really great example of the power of a pause, which I think we really need as a nation. There's a lot of divisiveness, and I think that having someone who's young, because you know, our focus moving forward in the political space and in areas, the opportunities of growth, we're always looking at our youth. And so to have a young man who was very much so business savvy, also politically savvy, culturally savvy, to be struck down on, you know, a day of celebration the way that he was, I think that that was the pause that really kind of jerked collectively everyone back to a place to really take stock of what it is that we're prioritizing, and that all Black lives, I mean, Black lives do matter, and not just the ones that are celebrities, but all Black lives matter. So I think it was really just a time for us to really kind of step back and take stock of what's happening, what's important to us at this day and time.
Eugene, what struck me is he was really honest about where he came from and the kind of life that he was in. But in his death, people are seeing videos that they probably never saw before. Millions of people are seeing them where he's talking, as Erica said, about business. You know, things that he had to learn through the streets and through personal experience and through gleaning what he could from people he was around. So not just rap artists, you know, not just what they think is a typical rapper, but in hearing his words and seeing, to me, what it proved was you can come from something, but you don't have to end up that. So he broke that narrative.
The thing is this, there are a lot of people that talk the black business talk, that talk the black empowerment talk, that talk the rebuilding the community talk. The beauty of Nipsey was that he actually lived it. And he was that, you know, before he was a rapper. You know, to a degree, I think, you know, rapping almost was a side job for him.
Right.
You know, I watched the service, you know, for the most part all the way through. My favorite part of it was, you know, outside of Janae just serenading us, my favorite part of it was his brother's speech. You know, his brother actually gave the backstory on how they came to own that lot. You know, it was almost literally by chance. You know, they had come. You know, it was an empty, vacant shopping center for the most part. You know, they come and put up multiple businesses there, and then the city actually came down and put pressure on the lot owner. And you know, the lot owner essentially had given them 30-day notice on multiple slots that they were occupying for different businesses. A 30-day notice on them, and looked at them and said, "Listen, I don't want to kick you out, but the city's giving me pressure, the police are giving me pressure, the DA's giving me pressure. But what I want to do is sell it to you." And what his brother said, "Listen, we don't know how we're going to come up with the cash, we don't know how we're going to make it happen, but you know, Nip figured it out, and we ended up, you know, owning a lot, and that's where he died. That's his legacy." And so. The beauty of it is that, you know, there are a lot of people that especially recently in the last couple of years, got on the black empowerment wave, got on the black business wave, and to a degree treated it like a wave. But for Nipsey, it was a lifestyle, it was a legacy development. I mean, you know, you don't just, you know, build a incubator for black kids to learn STEM and learn business and not leave a legacy. You know, you don't come in and start multiple businesses in a particular area, because there is a certain thing when it comes to concentration and providing jobs in a concentrated area, and don't leave a legacy. But I mean, but that's just one part of it. I mean, even from the music side, you know, him literally owning all of his work, you know, not being willing to kowtow to the big labels. Right. You know,
learning the lessons of the past is what that's called. But he, to me, he wasn't just talking the talk, he walked the walk. And he did it in the place that he came from. But we have so much more in this Power Pack show today. We're going to take a break right now, and we'll be back in a moment with my interview with Bishop T.D. Jakes.
You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it. Hey fam, want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered, the blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play.
April is World Autism Awareness Month, during which the goal is to promote awareness, acceptance, and support for those on the autism spectrum and their families. In the United States, autism disproportionately affects black children, yet black and Hispanic children continue to be less likely to be identified with autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, than white children. These differences suggest that black and Hispanic children may face socioeconomic or other barriers that lead to a lack of or a delayed access to evaluation, diagnosis, and services. Even after diagnosis, parents are often overwhelmed, trying to navigate the maze of the education system in order to do what is best for their children, and don't I know it. So, to help the parents who are watching today, or perhaps you know some parents who need this information, here to offer guidance is an expert in the field, education law attorney, Reverend Denise Nance Pierce. Welcome to you, Reverend Pierce.
Thank you, thank you.
And I have to confess, yes, you're Reverend Pierce, Attorney Pierce, and all those things, but you are also Denise Pierce, who I have known practically as long as I have been an adult, and you hail from the great state of Texas.
Yes,
and
I do.
I am so thankful that you are all the way here with us to talk about a subject that is near and dear to my heart and yours, I know, but is so important for everyone.
It certainly is.
Denise, a parent gets an autism diagnosis.
Right.
And the world goes black for a minute. And all of a sudden, they've got to figure out what part is medical, what part is learning disability, what the doctor's supposed to do, what the school's supposed to do, if there are supplements, if there are all of these random treatments that are going to be the one thing that brings their child through. And in their heads, they're hearing start school, start therapy, no cure, no recovery. So they're getting all of these messages at the same time. And then it intersects with the educational system. And I know that that is a unique specialty of yours. And what I think is interesting is that you work kind of on the other side of it than me as a mom who has a child on the spectrum who's fighting and advocating for my child, because you have worked for many years in defense of school systems and representing school systems. So I thought, which I told you, you're perfect for this, because you know what parents need to know in order to be able to help their children, which of course that's what the school system wants, and that's what the parents want for their children also. So first tell me, like, you're entering that system and they say to you, here's your IEP. What the heck?
So you've already started talking about the jargon of special education. And any parent that has a student with disabilities has probably learned and has mastered this jargon. But for a new parent entering into public schools and asking questions about how their students with disabilities should be served, it's important to ask people to explain what's happening. And essentially what's happening is every public school in our country has an obligation based on a federal law adopted by Congress in 1975 to make certain that every child with a disability in our school system is identified, located, and served in accordance with their disability, and gets a unique plan for that child called an IEP, an individualized education plan that is tailored for the educational needs of that student. And there's a team of people we call the IEP team. In my home state of Texas, we also call it the ARD committee, the Admission Review and Dismissal Committee. And that committee is empowered and expected by our federal law to make decisions about serving that child's unique needs. The parent is on that committee. The child can be on that committee if it's appropriate for the child to be there. There's also a regular education teacher, a special education teacher, a school administrator that has the ability to leverage the school's resources for the child's needs, someone that understands all the evaluation documents that come in, the evaluations from the doctors and from the psychologist and from others who have tried to ascertain how the student's disability relates to the child's educational needs, and therefore how the school can partner with mom and dad to make sure the child is getting educational benefits.
Okay, no, let me challenge you right there. Hold on, put a pause. And you sound real great. See, this is why she's my friend. But there are moms who are listening, right, and dads who everything you said, even though you said it in a way that could be understood, especially for people who've had to deal with it. I'm in my 10th year. My son's 13. Well, we got a diagnosis in this too. So I'm in my 11th year, right? But it may go right over some heads. And I don't know if you remember the story, but there was one time when I was having to go to an IEP meeting. It was very early on in the whole IEP process. I was in the parking lot, as I often was before I had to go into an IEP. And my whole process was sob and sob and sob, crying, because I had to deal with the fact that I was going into this IEP because my child, who was not yet 3, was in the position where he needed me to be in attend these meetings in order to get the education that he needed. And then after I sobbed and sobbed and sobbed, then I would call you. And you would remind me that I was the best advocate for my child, right? But I was Monique, lawyer, you know, Monique with multiple degrees, Monique who had some reasonable finances to be able to do things for my child. So I remember one of those days, I went in there and I said, well, this school system does not offer a class. My child is ready for a class. You're supposed to have an individual plan for my child. If there's no class, then shouldn't you create a class? And because I asked to create a class, the mama who had MS, who was coming there in a taxi every day, her son got a class. The dad who was working, who was single parenting, his son got a class. The woman whose child had Tourette's and had not yet been identified with autism got a class. So it was 6 other people who, because one advocate spoke up, got something. But there are parents who can't do that for themselves. What is it that the school system is offering, like in that big, thick packet of stuff they give you, that can tell a parent, what do I do now after I finish sobbing?
So here's the good news for parents, and whether the parent is educated or not. The good news is that the law affords the parent a seat at the table. The law affords the parent the ability to consent to testing and to consent to services. The parent is not unempowered in those conversations. And the parent should always advocate for their child in the best way that they know how in the context of those meetings, while also becoming increasingly informed as time goes on about their child. Also,
we're about to go to a break, so I want to hurry you along. Isn't there also a number or something that they can call if they need assistance with it? Doesn't the school system provide them assistance before they have to call somebody like me and I start suing school systems?
Absolutely. So the law requires, and every school will give the parents a packet called procedural safeguards that explains the rights of every parent, the rights of every child, including phone numbers to call to get information. I commend every parent of a special education student to avail themselves of those processes to make good relationships with their child's teachers and parents. The schools certainly have the persons who are empowered to make decisions and to make differences in terms of resources and services for their children. And parents just need to have those meaningful conversations both in IEP meetings and out of them so that their children can benefit from the school services that are being offered.
Oh, well, Reverend Dr. Attorney Pierce, thank you so much for sharing all of this decades of information with us today. It is World Autism Awareness Month. Thank you for having on your pen, but it's Autism Awareness Month every month for children of parents on the spectrum. So I'm wearing my blue, and I hope you all will join us in lighting it up blue this month. We're going to take another short break, and then when we come back, we'll be having my interview with Bishop T.D. Jakes.
There is no power on earth that can permanently stay our progress. Educator Booker T. Washington.
Southern University, Shreveport, Louisiana, was founded in 1967, located, as I said, in Shreveport, Louisiana. To donate to Southern University, please visit susla.edu. That's susla.edu. Calling all HBCU alums, students, and leaders. Enter the Ford Motor Company HBCU Mobility Challenge and win $25,000 for your school. That's a lot of dough. Come on, schools. Building on their long-term support of HBCUs, Ford is looking to improve mobility in HBCU communities through innovative solutions. The winning program will receive a grant of up to $25,000 to implement their proposal. The deadline to apply has been extended to April 15th, 2019. Go to fgb.life for more information and to apply. Ford goes further in our community. Now, earlier today, I talked with Bishop T.D. Jakes, #1 New York Times best-selling author, filmmaker, and senior pastor of the Potter's House in Dallas, Texas, about his new book, Crushing: God Turns Pressure into Power. We also talked about the criminal justice system and ways to decrease the recidivism rates in the United States. Here's that interview. Bishop Jakes, thank you so much for being with us on Roland Martin Unfiltered today. I am excited because I've gotten not just a preview, but I have your brand new book, Crushing, in my hands, and I got to hear you a couple of days ago at First Baptist Glen Arden, so I already know something that the rest of the world is about to find out, that you are on your 41st book. This is your 41st book now, and it is one that, in my opinion, is perfect for the season we are in. Can you please just tell us a little bit about Crushing?
You know, one of the things that really intrigued me about writing this book is that when I look back over my own life, it was not the successes that made me strong, that made me endure, that made me escalate to the next level. It was actually the crushing moments in my life, the difficult times, the hard times, the perplexing times, that I actually saw the greatest increase and the greatest effect on myself as a person, as a leader, economically, in every aspect of my life. And this book, Crushing, really grapples with the notion that much like grapes turn to wine, we have to go through certain crushings in order to reach the final state of what we really need to be. The art of it is to go through it and not get stuck in it.
Yes, yes, I understand. And I love the fact that you talk about how being a grape, some people think is a finish line, but really being the grape, being the fruit, is just a start. We're working our way through a process so that we can be something much more powerful.
Well, you know, when Jesus lifted up the cup, and this is a season where Christians everywhere remember the Last Supper and the crucifixion and the resurrection during this season, we're so cognizant of the fact that when Jesus lifted up the cup, all that the grape would go through to become wine was everything that he would go through. Both he and the grape were born to die. The grape is a crop that is raised so that it can be crushed. And right before Christ himself was to be crushed, he lifted up the cup and said, "Do this in remembrance of me." And I think that there's a great metaphorical lesson to be learned there, that before he could have a resurrection, he had to have a crucifixion. And before we could be crowned, we have to be crushed. And so many people are in the process rather than the promise, and frustrated by the process, feeling like they're not going to get out. But the reality is the process is something that you go through, not that you go to. And if you keep on forging forward, you will come out of it.
And one of the things that I was thinking about as I was reading and as I was hearing you the other day is that this country really has been going through a crushing process, that many people are concerned for their livelihoods, they're concerned for how they're going to take care of their loved ones if their loved ones get sick, they're concerned about the political environment, and it seems like we may be going through some fermentation right now as a whole. Is there anything that you can offer just to the people who are watching that will encourage them in such uncertain times?
You know, this period that we're in right now as African Americans reminds me very much of why Joshua, after he had served up under Moses and had been one of the spies that had crossed the wall to the promised land, he then, up under his leadership, sent more spies to cross over the wall to the promised land so that they would be as motivated as he is.
Yes.
This generation that we have right now has never seen racism like their parents did. This is their first encounter with the reality that this is not just a historical context, that we are not in a post-racist society, that it still raises its ugly head, more prevalent than we've seen in recent years. And that awakening is important so that we can continue to press forward and hold elected officials more accountable to the needs of all people and not just some people. And I think that's an important awakening to happen. But I do believe that when the crushing stops and when the test is over, that we will come out the better. We have seen worse days than these and survived them and came out the better. And I'm hopeful and optimistic, even in the face of discouraging news and headlines, that ultimately the best of our country will rise out of the ashes of the disparity that it finds itself in right now.
Amen. And we certainly need voices like yours to just be a guiding force as we fight through these times. But you mentioned racism and how some people kind of were at ease and didn't realize how prevalent it still is. One of the things that I know you know and is a concern of yours is the way that our people of color are disproportionately affected in the criminal justice system. And I had the pleasure of watching the Tory graduation for your ministry, I guess it was almost a week ago, and I just wondered if you would talk a little bit about what the recidivism issue is for our country and what you believe we can do to tackle it, because you guys seem to have figured something out that the rest of the country has not.
Well, our Texas Offenders Reentry Initiative, we call it TORI, has been in existence for over 10 years. We have seen 23,000 formerly incarcerated inmates go through our program, our year-long program, and graduate. Our rate of recidivism is the lowest in the country, and it is because we get to underlying causes like helping them to get GEDs, helping them to get dressed for job interviews or proper clothing, helping them with simple things like how to use a cell phone, right down to anger management, right down to increasing their understanding of what is a family and how to re-assimilate back into a society that has survived without them. We have to have a very practical, pragmatic program that reduces the rate of recidivism, but we also have to work, when you start talking about criminal justice, I'm on the back end of it. I'm on the people coming out. Right. We also need work on the front end to stop people going in because they didn't have representation, plea deals that go awry to the benefit of somebody who's trying to run for election. We have to take the carrot away from elected officials that if you incarcerate more people, that means you're tough on crime and therefore more electable. We have to reward them for being solution-oriented rather than turning the criminal justice system into a business, a big business that's in Wall Street. All of those things need to be changed and so many things more in order for us to really fix the damaging, prevailing, disproportionate incarceration of Black people.
Well, don't get me started, Bishop. You know, that's one of my hot button topics also. But before I let you go, I want to give an opportunity for you to let everybody know that there is an International Pastors and Leadership Conference coming up. I know that it's April 25th, 26th, 27th. But if you'd like to just give a shout out and let them know something about what's going on.
We're going to be in Tampa, Florida. They can go to pastorsandleaders.org and look at the vast array of speakers that we have coming. There will be over 40 different countries that are represented. Oddly enough, our Pastors and Leadership Conference over the years has taken on a new dimension. It's not just pastors anymore. In fact, it's a lot of them are leaders, corporate leaders, government leaders, city leaders, medical leaders, all coming together to see how that they can enhance themselves as entrepreneurs and business people. It's going to be in Tampa, and they can register online. Registration is going incredibly well. And if there are also listeners that are interested in picking up this crushing book, either because you're in it or you have been in it or you feel stuck in it or you're trying to get over it, they will be available wherever books are sold starting Tuesday, or they can be pre-ordered on Amazon.com, books, BarnesandNobles.com, or you can go to the store and get them wherever books are sold starting this Tuesday.
Well, we sure appreciate being hot off the press, really before the press, so that people can know about this book. I know that it's going to be a blessing. Please, everyone, get Crushing. God Turns Pressure into Power. Bishop Jakes, thank you so much for taking the time today. We appreciate you.
No, thanks for me. God bless. Bye-bye.
Speaking of the International Pastors and Leadership Conference, oh my, do I have a treat for you in our next guest, who's going to be one of the featured speakers, and you're going to want to hear what she has to say. Every year, more than 19 million Americans suffer from some type of depressive illness. According to the Surgeon General report, African Americans are overrepresented in populations that are particularly at risk for mental illness. Here to offer insight and direction is therapist, minister, and founder of Turn the Light On, Dr. Anita Phillips. Welcome, Dr. Anita.
Welcome, thank you.
I'm happy that you're here, but I'm happy that you're here on purpose about this topic, because everything that we read is kind of like too many black people are depressed and not talking about it. Black people are depressed in church. Black people are depressed at work, but there seems to still be a stigma associated with it. So before we dig in, though, can you explain the difference between somebody having the blues and having clinical depression?
Absolutely. So we all have negative emotions at some time or another. We all get sad, we all get down, we all feel discouraged. The difference is when we are unable to get those feelings to pass. When we want to feel better, simply can't feel better. So while I don't encourage people to self-diagnose, I generally will say if you feel bad way more often than you feel good, I'd like you to go and talk to somebody and find out about what might be going on.
And I've heard you say this before, but I want to ask you again. Is there anybody who couldn't benefit from therapy? Like, if you think you need it, shouldn't you just get it?
It's definitely a if you have to ask situation. So when people say, do you think I should go to therapy? I say, absolutely. If it's ever even crossed your mind, you should go. Therapy is not for mentally ill people. Therapy is for people. Now, all of us can benefit from therapy. I've been to therapy. I will go again if I need to. It's really just about having a space to talk to someone who can help you reflect on your current situation, help you get clarity, change your perspective. And if it turns out that there's something deeper going on, they can steer you in the direction of getting that treatment as well.
So we see the numbers, and we see that black people are overrepresented, that the numbers are high. And I know there's reasons dating back to slavery for that. But if you could talk about kind of where we are now and what societal things or physical things or whatever it is, your specialists tell us why we are in the position we're in.
Well, definitely, as you mentioned, slavery, generational trauma is real. When a group of people suffer the type of trauma that African Americans have suffered generation after generation, that trauma is actually passed on, not just in terms of our emotional state and the way that we deal with crises in our environment, but actually genetically. Trauma has an impact on our very DNA. And so we really have to give credence to what has happened to us under this continued pressure. So generational trauma is a major issue, but also we are overrepresented in many groups that are high risk for mental illness, including people who live below the poverty line, exposure to community violence, foster care. There are so many areas where mass incarceration, where African Americans are overrepresented in groups that have been known to have higher rates of mental illness. And so we really need to be stepping up our interventions. But unfortunately, we have had difficulty having our community access culturally competent care. And that is a real challenge.
Okay, so I have so much more, but I'm excited. Eugene looked at me because, you know, we're not supposed to be talking to reparations about reparations today. We'll get to it.
How are we going to pay for that?
Dr. Anita just said
Come on.
that suffering from slavery is encoded into our DNA. Now, so when you start talking about descendants of slaves and what they're due, it's not just because of something that happened however many hundred years ago. It's because of things we are still suffering now.
Absolutely.
But I know you got good news and bad news. So, I mean, are we bad news first? Are we through the bad news to get to the good news? Or what?
Primarily through the bad news. I think we all understand the needs that's in our community, and it is intensifying. There was a study released last year that has us very, very concerned, showing that African American children's suicide rate is spiking and has surpassed that of white children of the same age. And that is the first time in history that our suicide rate has outpaced that of white Americans in any segment of our population, much less our children. So we are in a crisis state. These generations of adverse experiences, the environmental factors that we're suffering, if we don't move now and fast, our children are going to be lost. We don't have any more time to play around with this. And so it is critical that we are having this conversation. And that is the good news. The conversation is picking up momentum. I feel like we're talking about how we don't talk about it so much that we're talking about it.
Right.
I think we're crossing over.
We're finding a way to talk about it.
Absolutely.
Because, and if you could just, I want the good news, but if you could kind of explain what the stigma has been in dealing with it for somebody listening now who's maybe thinking they have a problem, but they don't want to admit it because they're conceived as weak or someone who can't handle things, you know, like black people are just supposed to suffer.
Absolutely. So in our community, we place particular value on being in our right mind. You know, whether we're in church talking about being in our right mind or on the street saying get your mind right, we place a lot of value on mental clarity, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's just a worldview difference. But in the face of mental health or mental distress or mental illness, it becomes a little bit of a stigma because if your mind isn't right, somehow that may make you weak. This has been exacerbated by the fact that professional mental health has not always been very competent in terms of dealing with people of color. So for a long time, the black experience was stigmatized by professional mental health. For a long time, religion was stigmatized by professional mental health, placing black people kind of in double jeopardy because we are particularly spiritual people. And so the mental health field has not always been hospitable to us. So we had a problem from both sides, and it became kind of a perfect storm. But we are definitely stepping beyond that and realizing that we don't have to suffer. You don't have to feel badly all the time. Life doesn't have to be a push and a struggle. But when you're dealing with basic survival needs, people don't always have time to take care of their emotions. But now we're looking to help people take care of their emotional health in the presence of other physical health needs that they may have, so that we're able to be healthy across the board.
So I want you to talk to 3 people quickly.
Okay.
There's a pastor listening. And he's trying to figure out what to do about mental health issues in his church. So talk to him. And then there's a young woman listening, and she is contemplating suicide. So I want you to talk to her. And then there's a young child, teenager, listening, and they're going through struggles that they don't want to talk to their parents about. Tell them where they can go.
Where they can go
to get the help.
To the pastor, I would say that this is a very important spiritual issue. To the Christian pastor in particular, the Bible is very clear about the relationship between emotional health and spiritual health. They feed each other simultaneously. And so I would encourage that pastor to seek out counselors who are state licensed in their community who are also Christians, and there are quite a few of them. I understand that pastors often feel safer with someone who has the same spiritual background and perspective as them. There are plenty of them, and that is a myth. Has been a myth that counselors are never Christians or never religious, so they can go and search for a counselor in their community. To that young woman who is feeling like life is no longer worth living, like tomorrow will never come, I say, yes, it absolutely will, and I want her to talk to someone. Please call a national crisis hotline, 1-800-273-TALK. There are people who have gotten training and get up in the morning and go sit by a phone hoping that you will call them when you're in that moment of distress. They're there for no other reason but that. And then to that child, I would say if you can't talk to your parents about how you're feeling or you've tried and they don't seem to understand, grab someone at school, a guidance counselor, a teacher, the principal, and let them know that you feel like you need some help because the internet may not lead you in the right direction. And I would really rather you talk to an adult that, that you love and that you trust and just keep going until somebody turns around and gives you the help that you need. And of course, a young person can dial that number as well. We know that they all have cell phones these days. 1-800-273-TALK.
Talk. Okay, I'm going to turn to our panel. First, ladies first. Miss Erica, do you have a question for Dr. Anita?
I do, and so thank you, Dr. Anita, for the work that you do. My question is, in communities, I know in Baltimore, they're switching out, or they replace rather, in-school suspension with meditation, things of that nature. Do you see that as something? Do you see that practice as being something that could help to curb those high numbers that you talked about of African-American children that are dying by suicide?
I do. I think teaching children mindfulness techniques is a very powerful way to intervene in behavioral issues because when children are able to manage their emotions and learn to self-soothe, and many children have not learned to self-soothe, then they are more likely to be able to deal with those negative emotions and recognize that they are transient. No emotion is permanent, but it's hard to tell that to a child. Some adults can't even understand and believe that. And so I do believe that mindfulness practices do give an opportunity for children to learn learn to self-soothe. And I know some parents at times may be worried about those kind of practices, wondering if they are contradictory to the faith traditions they may have at home, but they certainly can be complementary. And if they talk to their children about that, and during those quiet moments, if they'd like to bring prayer into their mindfulness or whatever tradition their family teaches, it can actually strengthen the relationship between the school, the child, and the parent. So I think it's excellent.
Eugene?
I know some personalities are like pushing tools like Talkspace and whatnot. I guess my question is, are there any culturally sensitive tools available?
For online counseling, for things like Talkspace. So I don't know of a dedicated online counseling service that's focused on people of color as of yet. But that's a great idea, and now my head's like, it's an excellent idea, definitely. But when you go into some of the online counseling services, you can ask specifics. And so if someone would like to be connected with an online counselor who's a person of color, they can request that in the profile that they set up. So that's possible.
Okay, Dr. Anita, I know that in a couple of weeks you're going to be going and speaking at the Pastors in Leadership Conference, and it really deals with kind of an area of specialty of yours. Can you just maybe give folks a preview so they can know what they have an opportunity to hear?
Oh, wow. I'm super excited about being at Pastors and Leaders, because when we're talking to people at the head of an organization, we're able to get at the people who are in the organization. At Bishop Jake's conference, I'll be addressing the intersection of faith and mental health, really showing not just that they can coexist, but how they are deeply related, so that particularly pastors are able to flow easily in their conversation between spiritual matters and mental health matters, and help them to recognize when it's time to refer someone to a mental health professional, when their issues have exceeded that of pastoral care, or have exceeded that of traditional pastoral training. So I'm really happy that we'll be able to impact a great number of people by being able to give clarity to their leaders.
So I know there are a lot of websites that people can go to try to find a counselor, but is there one that you can suggest where they can look up someone who would be specific to their needs?
Sure. So there's two I would suggest. Therapy for Black Girls is a very popular one right now, and they can go there and look for someone of color in their community. But also Psychology Today has a wonderful search engine on their website, psychologytoday.com. You can put in your zip code, your health insurance, any issue that you're concerned about getting counseling for, and there's a picture associated with each profile. So if you're looking for a person of color or a man or a woman, you're able to see that and read a little bit about that counselor and be able to make an educated choice, at least to start with.
Well, I know we're just scratching the surface, but thank you, Dr. Anita Phillips, for helping us to turn the light on mental health.
Thanks for having me.
So, and one more time on the 800 number.
1-800-273-TALK.
1-800-273-TALK. Please call right now if you need it. Save some lives. Share it with somebody you know. That's it for this edition of Roland Martin Unfiltered. I want to thank our guests, Bishop T.D. Jakes, Dr. Anita Phillips, Attorney Denise Pierce, and our panel, Eugene Craig and Erica Savage Wilson. Roland will be back on Monday, and I will be out of here. I'm Monique Presley. Have a good night, y'all.